In the dead of winter, in a poverty-stricken town, a young black woman working at a rundown diner struggles to care for her ailing mother. One snowy night, she finds two white children nearly frozen on the street. Moved by their orphaned plight, she risks everything, including her job to take them in. Her kindness costs her dearly. Just when it seems all is lost, the children's grandparents arrive, and her life changes forever. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. In the dead of winter, when the thermometer drops to 14 degrees below freezing, death walks the empty streets of forgotten American towns. Tonight, in the poverty-stricken corners of rural Tennessee, two small white children are taking desperate steps toward what might be their final hour. The wind cuts through Main Street like a razor blade, carrying with it the bitter sting of snow that has been falling for 3 days straight. Streetlights flicker weakly over cracked sidewalks, casting long shadows that seem to swallow everything in their path. This is Millfield, a town that prosperity forgot decades ago, where boarded-up storefronts outnumber the living, and hope is as scarce as heat in the winter months. Inside Maggie's Diner, the only establishment still glowing with warm yellow light at 11 at night, Maya Johnson wipes down the same coffee-stained table for the fourth time this hour. Her dark hands move mechanically across the worn Formica surface, but her mind drifts to the unpaid electric bill, sitting on her kitchen counter at home, where her 68-year-old mother lies coughing in bed with pneumonia. They can't afford to treat properly. At 22 years old, Maya carries the weight of two lives on her shoulders, her own and her mother's, sustained only by the meager tips from late-night truckers and the occasional insomniac seeking refuge from their demons in black coffee and day-old pie. Maya pauses in her cleaning and glances toward the frost-covered window, her breath creating small clouds in the poorly heated diner. The owner, Mr. Henderson, keeps the thermostat set just high enough to prevent the pipes from freezing, but low enough to remind his employees that comfort is a luxury his profit margins cannot afford. Through the glass, she watches the snow continue its relentless assault on the empty street, each flake adding another layer to the white shroud that seems determined to bury this town alive. Then she sees them. Two small figures emerge from the swirling snow like ghosts materializing from another world. Maya presses her face closer to the cold window, her heart suddenly beating faster as she realizes what she's witnessing. A boy no more than 12 years old carries another child on his back, a smaller girl whose arms dangle limply over her brother's shoulders. They move with the desperate, unsteady gait of the starving and freezing, weaving back and forth across the empty street as if unsure of their destination or perhaps too weak to walk in a straight line. Maya's eyes widen in horror as she notices the details that make the scene even more heartbreaking. The older boy's feet are completely bare, leaving dark spots of blood in the snow with each agonizing step. The younger child, unconscious and hanging like a rag doll, wears only one thin sock on her left foot. The right foot is bare and appears blue-black from frostbite. Neither child wears a coat, only thin t-shirts that provide no protection against the deadly cold that has already claimed so many victims this winter. The older boy stops directly in front of the diner, his small body swaying dangerously under the weight of his burden. Maya can see his lips moving, talking to the unconscious girl on his back, though no sound penetrates the thick glass that separates her warm world from their frozen nightmare. His face pale as the snow around him shows a determination that breaks Maya's heart. The look of a child forced to become a man far too soon. Mia's mind races backwards 6 months to a memory she has tried desperately to forget. The image floods back with sickening clarity. The Henderson house at the end of Maple Street, engulfed in flames that reach toward the star-filled sky like orange fingers of death. The volunteer fire department arrived 20 minutes too late, their aging equipment no match for the inferno that consumed everything in its path. Maya remembers standing in the crowd of neighbors, watching helplessly as two small boys in school uniforms clutched each other on the front lawn, their world literally burning to ash before their innocent eyes. She remembers the paramedics emerging from the smoking ruins, carrying two body bags that were far too small for adults, yet contained what remained of Thomas and Sarah Henderson, a young interracial couple whose love story had ended in tragedy. The boys returning from their after-school program had arrived home to find their parents already claimed by the merciless flames. Maya recalls how the older boy had stood perfectly still, his arm wrapped protectively around his younger sister. both of them staring at the charred skeleton of their home with expressions of shock so profound that it seemed to age them decades in a single moment. Now, 6 months later, that same burned-out shell of a house stands as a monument to their loss. Without relatives to claim them and no insurance money to rebuild, the boys had simply disappeared from public view, becoming invisible casualties of a system that fails its most vulnerable citizens. Maya had seen them occasionally from a distance, scavenging through garbage bins behind the grocery store or darting between abandoned buildings like feral cats, but she had never imagined their situation had become this desperate. The older boy's knees buckle slightly, and he adjusts his grip on his unconscious sister, his small hands white with cold and exhaustion. Maya watches as he takes 3 more steps toward the diner's entrance, then stops again, his body trembling with something that might be cold, might be fear, or might be the kind of desperation that comes when a child realizes he is completely alone in a world that doesn't care whether he lives or dies. Maya abandons her cleaning rag and moves quickly toward the door, her heart pounding with a mixture of compassion and urgency. As she reaches for the handle, she hears the older boy's voice for the first time, a weak, cracked whisper that cuts through the wind like a cry for salvation. "Please," he calls toward the glowing windows of the diner, his voice barely audible but carrying the weight of absolute desperation. "Please, somebody help us. I think my little sister is dying, and I don't know what to do anymore. We haven't eaten anything in 3 days except some watery gyri our neighbor Mrs. Patterson gave us before she passed away yesterday. I don't want to be a burden on anybody, but I'm scared Lily's going to die if I don't find help soon. And I promised our mama before she died that I would always take care of her." The boy's words hit Maya like a physical blow, each syllable revealing another layer of tragedy that no child should ever have to endure. She realizes in this moment that she is witnessing something that will change her life forever, a test of her humanity that will define who she truly is beneath the surface of her own struggles and hardships. Without a moment's hesitation, Maya pushes through the heavy glass door of the diner, the sudden blast of Arctic air hitting her face like a slap that takes her breath away. The wind whips through her thin uniform, but she barely notices the cold as she rushes toward the 2 children who stand swaying in the snow like 2 fragile saplings about to be uprooted by the storm. The older boy looks up at her with eyes that hold a mixture of desperate hope and terrified uncertainty, as if he cannot quite believe that someone has actually responded to his plea for help. "Oh my God, honey, what are you doing out here?" Maya's voice cracks with emotion as she reaches them, her hands instinctively moving to touch the unconscious little girl's forehead, which feels cold as marble beneath her fingertips. The child's lips have turned a frightening shade of blue, and her breathing comes in shallow, barely perceptible gasps that send waves of panic through Maya's chest. "We need to get you both inside right now before you freeze to death out here." The boy's legs give out completely as soon as Maya's hands take some of the weight of his sister, and he collapses to his knees in the snow, his entire body shaking so violently that Maya can hear his teeth chattering from where she stands. "I'm sorry," he whispers through lips that can barely form the words, his voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who has been fighting an impossible battle for far too long. "I didn't know where else to go, and Lily stopped talking to me about an hour ago, and I was so scared that she was going to die. And I couldn't let that happen because I promised Mama that I would always protect her no matter what." Maya carefully lifts the little girl into her own arms, feeling how light and fragile she is, like holding a bird with broken wings. The child's body is so cold that Maya can feel the chill seeping through her own clothes, and she realizes with growing alarm that they may already be too late to prevent serious damage from the frostbite that is clearly set into both children's extremities. "You did exactly the right thing by bringing her here," Maya tells the boy as she helps him struggle to his feet, supporting his weight with her free arm while balancing his unconscious sister against her chest. "You're a brave big brother, and we're going to take care of both of you right now." Inside the warm sanctuary of the diner, Maya quickly settles the little girl onto the cracked vinyl booth seat nearest to the ancient radiator that clanks and hisses in the corner, wrapping her tiny body in every clean dish towel she can find, while the boy collapses into the opposite seat with a groan of relief that seems to come from the depths of his soul. Maya's hands work with practiced efficiency as she turns up the thermostat as high as it will go. knowing that M. Henderson will be furious about the electric bill, but not caring about anything except getting these children warm enough to survive the night. "My name is Maya," she says as she kneels beside the booth, gently removing the single wet sock from Lily's foot and examining the damage that the cold has inflicted on her small toes, which have turned an alarming shade of purple-black that makes Maya's stomach clench with worry. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The boy looks up at her with eyes that seem far too old for his young face, eyes that have seen things no child should ever have to witness. "I'm Jake," he whispers, his voice still trembling from cold and exhaustion. "And that's my sister Lily. She just turned 8 last month right before." His voice trails off, and Maya can see the pain flickering across his features as he remembers whatever terrible thing happened last month. Maya disappears into the small kitchen behind the counter, moving with urgent purpose as she fills a large pot with warm water and grabs the emergency blanket from the first aid kit that hangs on the wall near the coffee machine. When she returns to the booth, she carefully places Lily's feet into the warm water, watching as the little girl stirs slightly and lets out a small whimper. That is the first sound Maya has heard her make. "That's good, baby," Maya murmurs softly, her voice taking on the gentle, soothing tone that she uses when her own mother is having one of her bad days. "You're safe now, and we're going to get you all warmed up." Jake watches every movement Maya makes with the intensity of someone who has learned not to trust easily, but Maya can see the desperate gratitude in his eyes as she wraps the emergency blanket around his shoulders and hands him a steaming cup of hot chocolate that she has prepared with extra marshmallows floating on top. "Drink this slowly," she instructs him, her hands lingering on his shoulders for a moment longer than necessary, trying to transfer some of her own warmth into his shivering body. "It might hurt your stomach a little bit since you haven't eaten in a while, but it will help warm you up from the inside." As the minutes pass and the children gradually begin to thaw out in the blessed warmth of the diner, Maya moves between them like a mother hen tending to her chicks, checking Lily's breathing, adjusting Jake's blanket, and keeping a careful eye on both of their faces for any signs that the cold has done permanent damage to their small bodies. She prepares a simple but nourishing soup using ingredients from the diner's kitchen, ladling generous portions into bowls, and watching with satisfaction as Jake begins to eat with the desperate hunger of someone who has been starving for days. When Lily finally opens her eyes and looks around the diner with confusion and fear, Maya is there immediately sitting down beside her on the booth seat and speaking in the same gentle voice she would use with a frightened animal. "Hello there, sweet girl," Maya says, smoothing Lily's tangled hair back from her forehead with infinite tenderness. "You're safe now. My name is Maya, and this is my diner, and you and your brother Jake are going to stay here tonight where it's warm and safe." Lily's eyes, wide with uncertainty, search Maya's face for any sign of deception or danger. But whatever she sees there must reassure her, because she nods slightly and allows Maya to help her sit up enough to sip some warm broth from a spoon. As the hours of that first night pass slowly by, Maya finds herself falling into a rhythm of care that feels as natural as breathing. She makes beds for the children using extra aprons and tablecloths spread across the booth seats. She finds a pair of her own old socks in her locker to replace the wet, frozen sock that Lily had been wearing. And she stays awake throughout the entire night, checking on them every few minutes to make sure they are still breathing steadily and that their body temperatures are returning to normal levels. When the first pale light of dawn begins to filter through the frost-covered windows of the diner, Maya realizes that something fundamental has shifted inside her heart. These two children who came to her as strangers in the night have somehow become her responsibility, her purpose, her reason for fighting against the harshness of a world that seems determined to crush the innocent and the vulnerable. She watches Jake and Lily sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, their faces relaxed and free from the constant worry and fear that have been their companions since the night their parents died. And Maya makes a silent promise to herself and to them that she will find a way to keep them safe, no matter what obstacles stand in her way. For 3 precious weeks, Maya manages to keep her secret sanctuary hidden from the watchful eyes of authority and judgment. Every evening after the dinner rush dies down and the last customer leaves with a satisfied belly, Maya transforms the humble diner into a safe haven for Jake and Lily, who arrive like clockwork at 9 hours each night. Their faces gradually filling out and their eyes slowly losing the haunted look of children who have stared death in the face. Maya develops an elaborate routine of smuggling leftover sandwiches and day-old pastries into her locker, creating carefully wrapped packages that she distributes to the children along with clean socks, hand-me-down sweaters from her own sparse wardrobe, and most importantly, the kind of steady, unconditional love that both children have been desperately craving since the night their world burned to ashes. During the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, Maya watches Jake teaching Lily how to read from discarded newspapers. His 12-year-old voice, patient and gentle as he sounds, out words that are too advanced for her 8-year-old mind. Maya listens to Lily's soft giggling as Jake tells her stories about their parents, keeping their memory alive with tales of birthday parties and Christmas mornings when their biggest worry was whether they would have pancakes or waffles for breakfast. But cruelty has a way of finding kindness, especially when that kindness threatens the established order of who deserves help and who does not. On a Thursday morning in late February, Mr. Henderson arrives at the diner 2 hours earlier than his usual schedule, his face twisted into the kind of expression that Maya has learned to recognize as the harbinger of trouble. He stands in the doorway for a long moment, his cold eyes taking in every detail of the scene before him, the makeshift beds in the corner booth, the small pile of children's clothes folded neatly on the counter, the bowls and spoons that still carry traces of the oatmeal Maya prepared for breakfast. "Well, well, well," Mr. Henderson says, his voice dripping with the kind of satisfaction that comes from catching someone red-handed. "What exactly do we have here, Maya? It looks to me like you've been running some kind of unauthorized charity operation in my establishment, using my electricity, my heat, my food, and my property to play house with a couple of white kids who probably have relatives somewhere who should be taking care of them." Maya stands up slowly, her hands trembling, not with fear, but with righteous anger that burns in her chest. "Mr. Henderson," she begins, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her heart. "These children were dying out there in the snow. They lost their parents 6 months ago, and they have nowhere else to go. And I couldn't just stand by and watch them freeze to death when I had the power to help them survive." Henderson's laugh is harsh and bitter, the sound of a man who has convinced himself that compassion is a luxury that poor people cannot afford. "That's a real touching story, Maya, but this is a business, not a homeless shelter. You want to play the savior. You do it on your own time with your own resources, not mine." His eyes narrow as he looks at Jake and Lily, who have pressed themselves against the back of the booth like small animals trying to disappear. And frankly, I'm wondering what a young black woman thinks she's doing, trying to raise white children. Anyway, people might start asking questions, might start thinking things that could cause problems for my reputation in this community. The ugly truth of his meaning hits Maya like a physical blow, and she realizes that in a town where the color of someone's skin still determines their worth. Her act of cross-racial kindness was bound to be seen as something suspicious, something that threatens the carefully maintained boundaries that keep people in their designated places. "You're firing me," Maya states quietly, not asking a question, but simply acknowledging the reality she can see written across Mr. Henderson's face. "You're damn right I'm firing you," he replies, his voice rising with indignation. "You're fired for theft, for misuse of company property, for running an unauthorized operation on my premises. Clean out your locker and get these kids out of here before I call the authorities and have them taken away to wherever they're supposed to be." Maya's world tilts on its axis as she realizes that her small sanctuary has been destroyed, that the haven she created for Jake and Lily has been ripped away by the cold hand of a society that values property over people and profit over compassion. But even as her heart breaks for the loss of her job, Maya's first thought is for the 2 children who are looking at her with eyes full of terror and confusion. "Come on, babies," Maya says quietly, reaching out her hands to Jake and Lily, who scramble out of the booth and cling to her sides like drowning swimmers, grabbing onto a life preserver. "We're going to go to my house now. It's not as warm as here, and we don't have as much food, but at least we'll be together, and nobody can make us leave." She looks directly into Mr. Henderson's eyes as she speaks, her voice carrying a dignity that his cruelty cannot touch. "And we'll find a way to make it work, because that's what people do when they actually care about something more important than money and prejudice." 3 days later, Maya paces the floors of her tiny rental house like a caged animal, her eyes constantly moving to the window that faces the street, searching for any sign of Jake and Lily's return. They had stayed with her for exactly 72 hours, sleeping on the thin mattress in her living room, while she gave up her own bed and made do with a pile of blankets on the kitchen floor. Maya had shared her meager groceries with them, stretching each meal to feed 3 people instead of 2, watching them begin to relax slightly in the knowledge that they had found another temporary refuge. But on Sunday evening, when Maya returned from her frantic search for new employment, she found her house empty except for a carefully folded note written in Jake's 12-year-old handwriting. "Thank you for everything, Miss Maya. We don't want to be a burden on you when you already have so many problems. We heard you crying last night about the bills and your mama's medicine, and we decided it would be better if we went somewhere else. Please don't try to find us. We'll be okay somehow. Love, Jake and Lily." Maya's hands shake as she reads the note for the 100th time. Her heart breaking with the realization that these 2 children have sacrificed their own safety because they believe their presence is causing her additional hardship. She has searched every abandoned building, every alley, every place where 2 desperate children might seek shelter. But Jake and Lily have vanished as completely as if the earth had swallowed them whole, leaving behind only the devastating silence of Maya's empty house and the terrible knowledge that somewhere out there, 2 innocent souls are facing the brutal winter alone. On a cold Tuesday morning in March, exactly 1 week after Jake and Lily disappeared from Maya's life like smoke dispersing in the wind, Maya sits at her kitchen table staring at another stack of unpaid bills that seem to multiply like weeds in her mailbox, each envelope containing another reminder that her world is slowly crumbling around her. Her mother's labored breathing echoes from the bedroom down the hall, a constant reminder that the medication they can no longer afford is running dangerously low, and Maya has already pawned every item of value they own just to keep the electricity from being shut off for another month. The sound of a car engine purring outside her window is so unusual in this neglected neighborhood that Maya automatically looks up from her bills, expecting to see perhaps a lost tourist or someone making a wrong turn on their way to the more prosperous side of town. Instead, she sees a gleaming black SUV with tinted windows pulling slowly to a stop directly in front of her tiny rental house, its polished chrome bumpers and spotless paint job standing out like a diamond in a coal mine against the backdrop of peeling paint and broken sidewalks that characterize her street. Maya's heart begins to race with a mixture of hope and terror as she watches the rear doors of the expensive vehicle swing open, revealing first one small figure, then another, both moving with the cautious uncertainty of children who have learned not to trust too quickly or hope too deeply. Jake steps out first, his 12-year-old frame looking somehow both taller and more fragile than Maya remembers, followed immediately by Lily, whose 8-year-old hand automatically reaches for her brother's as they stand together on the cracked pavement, looking toward Mia's front door, with expressions that blend anticipation with the kind of nervous energy that comes from not knowing what to expect next. Behind them emerges an elderly couple who carry themselves with the unmistakable bearing of people who have never known what it means to worry about money or wonder where their next meal will come from. The man, tall and distinguished with silver hair and expensive clothes that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent, moves with the careful dignity of someone whose arthritis reminds him daily that age comes for everyone regardless of their bank account balance. The woman beside him, elegantly dressed in a wool coat that looks like it came from a magazine, has eyes that are red-rimmed from recent crying and hands that shake slightly as she reaches out to steady herself against her husband's arm. Mia's legs feel weak as she stands up from her kitchen chair and makes her way to the front door, her mind racing through 1,000 possibilities for what this unexpected visitation might mean for her life and for the lives of the 2 children who have somehow found their way back to her after a week of desperate searching and sleepless nights spent wondering if they were safe, warm, and alive somewhere in the vast indifference of the world. When Maya opens her front door, the first thing she notices is that Jake and Lily look healthier than she has ever seen them. Their faces fuller and their clothes clean and new, but their eyes still hold that same combination of weariness and longing that has characterized their expression since the night she first found them freezing in the snow outside the diner. Jake steps forward first, his young voice cracking with emotion as he tries to speak words that are clearly difficult for him to say. "Miss Maya," Jake begins, his hands twisting nervously in front of him as he struggles to find the right way to explain the miraculous turn of events that has brought him back to her doorstep. "These are our grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. Not the mean Mr. Henderson from the diner, but our daddy's parents, who we thought were dead because our daddy told us they died when we were babies." His words come out in a rush, as if he is afraid that if he speaks too slowly, this dreamlike situation will dissolve back into the harsh reality that has been their constant companion. But they're not dead, and they've been looking for us ever since they saw the video of what happened at the diner. And they want to take care of us now. But first, Jake wanted to come back and thank you properly for saving our lives when nobody else in the whole world cared whether we lived or died. The elderly man steps forward, removing his expensive hat with the old-fashioned courtesy of someone who was raised in a different era when manners and respect meant something more than they seem to in today's world. "Miss Johnson," he says, his voice carrying the slight tremor of advanced age, but also the unmistakable authority of someone who has spent decades making decisions that affected the lives of thousands of people. "My name is William Henderson, and this is my wife, Margaret. We owe you a debt that we can never fully repay for what you did for our grandchildren. And we've come here today to try to make things right in whatever small way we can manage." Margaret Henderson steps closer to Maya, her well-manicured hands reaching out to clasp Mia's work-worn fingers with a grip that conveys both gratitude and deep regret. "My dear girl," she says, her voice breaking with emotion as tears begin to flow freely down her cheeks. "We had no idea that our son Thomas and his wife Sarah had died. And we had no idea that Jake and Lily were out there suffering alone because of our own foolish pride and prejudice. We disowned our son 20 years ago because we couldn't accept that he wanted to marry a black woman, and we convinced ourselves that we were protecting our family's reputation when really we were just protecting our own narrow-minded bigotry." William Henderson's voice grows heavy with the weight of decades of regret as he continues his wife's explanation. "We found out about the children's situation when someone filmed what happened at the diner last week when you were fired for helping them. And that video has been viewed by millions of people all over the country who were moved by your selfless act of kindness. Someone who recognized the children from old family photos contacted us, and we hired private investigators who helped us track down Jake and Lily. 3 days ago." Jake's voice cuts through the adult conversation with the clarity and honesty that only children possess when they are telling a truth that comes straight from their hearts. "Miss Maya," he says, looking directly into her eyes with an intensity that makes her feel like he is seeing straight through to her soul. "I told them everything about how you saved us when we were dying, and how you fed us and kept us warm, and made us feel like we had a family again, and how you lost your job because you cared more about us than about your own safety. And I told them that even though they're our grandparents and they have a big house and lots of money, I still want to make sure that you're taken care of too, because you're the first person who showed us what real love looks like after our mama and daddy died." Margaret Henderson wipes her eyes with a lace handkerchief that probably costs more than Maya's weekly groceries, but her tears are genuine, and her voice carries the sincerity of someone who has learned an important lesson about what really matters in life. "We've already spoken with the owner of Henderson Industries about creating a position for you in our corporate headquarters," she tells Maya, her words measured and careful, as if she is afraid that speaking too quickly might make this offer disappear like a mirage. "It's a good job with excellent benefits, health insurance that will cover your mother's medical expenses, and a salary that will allow you to live with dignity while you continue your education if you choose to do so." The world seems to tilt and spin around Maya as she realizes that her life is about to change in ways that she never dared to dream possible. But more importantly, she sees in the faces of Jake and Lily the kind of happiness and security that every child deserves to have. The knowledge that they are wanted, loved, and protected by people who have the power to keep them safe from the harsh realities that have defined their young lives for far too long. As the months that follow transform from winter's harsh grip into the gentle promise of spring, Maya finds herself standing in the gleaming lobby of Henderson Industries on a Monday morning in late May, wearing a professional suit that Margaret Henderson helped her select and carrying a briefcase that contains reports and presentations that would have seemed impossible for a former diner waitress to comprehend just a few short months ago. The education fund that William and Margaret established for her has allowed Mia to enroll in night classes at the community college, where she is studying business administration with a focus on nonprofit management driven by a dream of someday opening a shelter for homeless children like Jake and Lily once were. Every other weekend, Maya drives her reliable used car, a gift from the Hendersons that she initially resisted until Jake pointed out that accepting help doesn't make her weak. It makes her smart to the Henderson estate, where she joins Jake and Lily for family dinners that feel like scenes from a movie she never thought she would be part of. She watches Jake excel in the private school where his grandparents enrolled him, his natural intelligence finally given the nurturing environment it needs to flourish. And she sees Lily blossom into the confident, joyful little girl she was always meant to be, surrounded by tutors and music lessons and art supplies that allow her creativity to soar. The viral video of Maya's firing has led to unexpected consequences beyond her own transformation. Mr. Henderson's diner closed permanently after a boycott led by social media activists. While Maya's story has inspired 3 other families in similar situations to reach out to the Henderson Foundation, that William and Margaret established to help bridge the gaps that poverty and prejudice create in communities across America. On quiet Sunday afternoons, when Mia visits her mother, who now receives the best medical care that money can buy, and whose health has improved dramatically with proper medication and treatment, Maya sometimes reflects on the night when 2 freezing children stumbled into her life and changed everything she thought she knew about the power of love to transcend the artificial boundaries that divide people from one another. She understands now that kindness is never wasted, that every act of compassion sends ripples through the world in ways that cannot be predicted or contained, and that sometimes the greatest victories come disguised as the most devastating defeats. The last Sunday in May, as Maya sits in the Hendersons' garden, watching Jake teach Lily how to plant tomatoes while William and Margaret smile from their porch chairs, she realizes that this unlikely family they have all created together, bound not by blood or race or social status, but by the simple recognition that love is the only force powerful enough to heal a broken world, represents everything that America could be if more people had the courage to choose compassion over comfort, understanding over ignorance, and hope over fear. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.